Let's take a peek at the killing floor. Don't let the name throw you, Jimmy. It's not really a floor. It's more of a steel grating that allows material to sluice through so it can be collected and exported. Getting hungry, Jimmy?
It's Brittany, bitch.
And the Iraq, everywhere like such as.
I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Out, Charlie! Out!
Our next door neighbors are foreign countries.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Remember Shuffle. My name is Ben. With me as always, my co-host Jordano. And today we are joined by returning friend of the show, Isaac Eager. Say hi, Isaac.
Howdy, y'all.
And today we will be discussing an incredible book and a couple movies from the 2000s. The unifying theme is food and the agricultural industry. We are discussing Fast Food Nation, as well as the film based off that book, and Food Inc.
This is a sprawling topic. I originally wanted to do an episode about McDonald's to really cover burger now that Trump is president again. Really get into what burger meant in the 2000s. But it turns out that, the agricultural industry touches so many things that this is going to be our first multi-part series. And this first episode is about the book and movie Fast Food Nation, which I really enjoyed. This book came out in 2000, 2001, and was like a muckraking book in the style of Uptown Sinclair. And sort of blowing a lid and exposing the agricultural industry, the fast food industry,
the ranching industry, the slaughterhouse industry,
Migrant labor industry.
Right. And it was excellent. Really, what a treat to read Fast Food Nation.
Yes. I will add, though, that one of the big through lines for this episode is that this is the 21st century version of muckraking. We're rebooting everything nowadays. We're rebooting Uptown Sinclair's The Jungle, right? We are going to Uptown Funk these companies up. But it turns out there are some very hard limits to muckraking. And I think our thesis for the episode is once you read this book, even though the book itself doesn't say it, the only program that you should believe in is nationalizing food production. That needs to be the move.
Yeah, our prescription is a little different from Eric Schlosser, who wrote Fast Food Nation, because what we're living in right now is, in every industry that we've seen on this podcast, from broadcasting to the agriculture industry, is a form of late-stage capitalism. Maybe there was some semblance of a free market that was regulated at one point, but we've deregulated it, and now in every industry we have an intense concentration of corporate market share, where we have 4 companies that basically own all the market share, and they are able to lobby Congress very effectively. They're able to do union busting. They're able to do price fixing. And it hasn't gotten better at all since 2000. And I think Eric Schlosser's main prescription was to go to farmers markets and buy organic.
Vote with your dollars.
Vote with your dollars, which is like a classic lib prescription. As we'll get into this episode, we'll just see all the ways in which our lives are made worse by the fact that we only have 4 agricultural companies, which is fitting for this pod because I feel like so often we talk about how we only have 4 movie making companies now.
Yeah, inherent in the idea of competition, as a pro-free market person will say, is that competition is going to result in more efficiencies and a better product. Competition has a fucking winner. If you let competition just keep happening, eventually it teleologically must end in winners and a monopoly or an oligopoly.
People became more health conscious in the 2000s. It's wild because we thought for sure a major chapter of Fast Food Nation would be about obesity in America. And it's almost not talked about at all. And I think it's because this book came out in 2000, 2001. And by the end of the decade, I think that any book that talks about fast food is going to think about the health effects of how much saturated fat you're eating and the caloric intake involved. And I think that a lot of the discourse around fast food shifted throughout the 2000s to really focus on how healthy it is, right? With documentaries like Super Size Me. And so I think that was one of the most interesting things about the book is the notes that they didn't play.
I'm really excited to have you on this pod, Isaac. You have some personal experience with some of these topics, right?
Yeah, well, I'm an expert eater, so I think that's why you guys have me on, because I'm the best eater there is. I think I'm also here for some plucky comic relief because this might be even darker than your most recent drone episode.
That's why we didn't meet the parents between these two. But Isaac, you were telling me you were a vegan from 7 to 21.
Yeah,
is that right?
I became a vegan not because I read a book or watched a documentary, but I accidentally killed a bunch of lizards. And growing up here in Florida, I would catch a lot of lizards, and I accidentally killed a bunch of babies once. And it so broke me down that I remember I was at like a grocery store called The Granary with my mom. And I looked at her and I said, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. And she's like, okay. And I did it till I was 21. And it wasn't for any awareness of agricultural malpractice or because Tyson is evil. It was just because I didn't want to kill animals.
Wow.
But now I'm fine with it.
7 is insane. Yeah, you were pretentious at a college level already.
Yeah.
You were getting started on Reed College years in advance.
I was destined to be a little schmuck.
And so when this book and movie came out, you must have felt vindicated.
Yeah, I think I was an ineffective vegan in that I ate a lot of those Morningstar vegan hot dogs, which are not good for you. So I wasn't being a vegan for health reasons. I was being a vegan to be an ass and shaming people and telling them that they're bad. And so I didn't help anyone else become vegan. And when this movie came out, I felt incredibly vindicated. I was like, see.
Hell yeah.
That's such an unfair standard that I feel like non-vegetarians apply to vegetarian food. Is they're like, oh, this fake hot dog doesn't taste as good and it's not good for you. Like, it's such an insane standard to be like, not only does it have to taste as good, but it also has to be good for you.
Yeah, no, it was very silly. I'm surprised I turned out to be as tall as I am, considering like I was eating the most sodium-laden tofu crap for like 10 years.
Well, here's the agenda for today. We are going to discuss Fast Food Nation as book, which itself is divided into chapters on different themes. So we'll discuss marketing to children, Fordism and labor, urbanism, the agricultural industry, and of course, migrant rights or lack thereof. We'll discuss the movie that they made, which is not some lived up documentary, but a drama.
Yeah, so it's interesting. The Fast Food Nation comes out in 2001. Midway through the decade, we get a fictionalized movie by Richard Linklater, the Fast Food Nation movie, which I really liked. And then by the end of the decade, we have the lib documentary, whose genre we're familiar with on this pod. Last time Isaac was here, we talked about Michael Moore's oeuvre, which is Food Inc., and that came out in the late 2000s. And then we'll be talking about the echoes in the culture for the agricultural industry in the 2000s. And I'd like to set up a little bit about our next episode, because I'd like our next part of this multi-part series to be devoted to McDonald's, to simply burger, because there's so much interesting stuff with McDonald's in the 2000s.
Yeah, and so in preparation for this bibliographical note, yeah, we read the friggin' book. We watched the movies.
We read a lot for this one. Yeah, Fast Food Nation, franchise, McDonald's in the East.
And you guys told me that you ate at exclusively fast food restaurants for the past month, like Morgan Spurlock, in preparation for this episode.
Yeah, and I was drinking as much as Morgan Spurlock, too.
For any commenter who says you should have covered blank and you're about to write you should have covered Supersize Me, don't worry, it's coming in part 2, okay?
Coming in the McDonald's devoted episode, exactly.
Whatever you think that we missed, it's coming in part 2.
What was, growing up, what was you guys, and to this day, I guess, what's your favorite fast food restaurant? Are you guys fast food eaters?
I mean, I try not to, but as we learned in this book, 70% of fast food trips are spontaneous, meaning you just see it, you smell it, and you had no plans or intentions of eating fast food. But like Poison Ivy and Batman and Robin, it just sort of draws you in romantically. The right answer, I feel like, is In-N-Out, because the employment standards are slightly higher and the prices are lower. But
dog shit fries. Give me a break.
Yeah, but maybe it's because they weren't created in a lab. I'd take probably a spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's with the fries.
Mm-hmm.
I was and am a Taco Bell man.
Yeah.
That meat goop, it hits so good.
I had a panic attack in Taco Bell once because in high school we were just stoners, and I would always have all these ideas of fun things to do, but we would always end up at Taco Bell at the end of the night and not have done anything at all. And I remember we were always ordering the same things over and over again, and I literally screamed and freaked out in a Taco Bell, being like, "We're wasting our lives! We're wasting our lives!"
Well, if they could see you now.
Podcast extraordinaire.
How about you, Isaac? What was and is your go-to? I guess you probably didn't have one because you were vegan.
No, Taco Bell was the vegan option. The bean burrito with no cheese. Taco Bell was formative for me. It was the only place I would really ever go. I do remember going and having a Whopper after my dad put our dog down. That's a formative memory.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was Taco Bell because it was cheap and we were stoned. Yeah, the other places I couldn't really eat any of their food anyway, so I didn't. And I might not be a vegan anymore, but I'm still happy to shame people for their eating habits. And you guys are disgusting for eating as much fast food as you do.
I'd say I get fast food maybe like once every 2 months or something. I find myself in a moment of weakness.
You're lying.
Oh,
okay, sure.
No, I'm not. I think that's a lot. That's 6 times a year. That's a decent amount of fast food.
I feel like people eat that many times in one day. Some Americans do.
I know Troop Hater, our mutual friend, he's like close to every other day.
Yeah, I can tell.
Like,
It shows.
I think,
yeah. It's obvious. Both in his attitude and his aura, it's like he's got like oil stink waves, like oil vapor emanating from him.
I have a few friends who will order McDonald's regularly on Uber Eats, and I can confidently say I have never once ordered fast food on Uber Eats. I think that it shouldn't be legal. Like, if you're going to be a piece of shit, you can't have a Bangladeshi guy drive it on a bicycle to you. I'm sorry, but if you're going to be a piece of shit, you have to go pick up the shitty food yourself. Yeah. Also, you probably want to eat that shit right away also. So don't wait 25 minutes for it to get to you.
Yeah, you don't want your like soggy, shitty fries that you're overpaying for. That's. I'm also very against, spiritually, I'm opposed to drive-thrus in all forms. At the bank, the pharmacy, whatever, you must go inside. You must go inside.
We'll get to that. We have a section on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. Starting from the cradle to the grave, marketing to children.
Yeah, so I think like the main point of this chapter in Fast Food Nation is that it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Basically, you've been marketed to since you were 0 months old, incessantly by McDonald's. And the taste of McDonald's has been perfected in a lab to make you crave it. And so what chance do any of us stand? And something I've been learning about reading about how McDonald's expands in other countries is that, this is a very explicit part of their consumer life cycle development plan, is people have established palates by the time they're adults, but children, their palates are open for the taking. So they're the easiest ones to make lifetime customers.
They also watch a shitload of TV. The book said the typical American child in 2000 watched 21 hours of TV a week. I'm sure it's probably lower now because they're on their phones and shit, but that's an opportunity that McDonald's seizes, and they are so intentional with how they target. I mean, what is their mascot? It's a fucking clown. Clowns were originally for children. You have the fact that they have the Happy Meal with the toys. They build playgrounds. They are coming for your children. And they have all these deals in terms of developing synergy with Hollywood studios, right? To get the licensed toys for the Happy Meals. And this benefits all of the corporations. By linking with a fast food company, a Hollywood studio typically gains between $25 million and $45 million in additional advertising for the firm, which like doubles their advertising budget. And everybody knows this is bad. When Disney signed an agreement with McDonald's, they stipulated that no Disney character could ever be depicted sitting in a McDonald's or be seen eating any of the McDonald's food.
Very funny, some details from this book, by the way. Eric Schlosser found out that the first ever actor that was hired to play Ronald McDonald was eventually fired for being too overweight. So he shouldn't actually be a manifestation of actually eating.
They should have stopped paying him in nuggets, man. That was their mistake. Was there food that you remember in your childhood that you were susceptible to, that the advertising got you, that you'd go to the grocery store with your parents and be like, I need this. I like absolutely need this thing to be happy?
Dude, Reese Puffs. Reese's for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
I got the McDonald's pizza pretty often as a child. The fast food flowed freely at my house, for sure. My parents had 5 kids. I think it was the easiest way to feed us all. I had Little Caesars pizza 3 days a week.
I love the advertising campaign for Little Caesars. It's hot and it's ready. Is it good? Like, no, it's hot and it's here. Put it in your eating hole.
Pizza. I always remember that.
I should specify both my parents worked. My mom mom worked shift work, 5 kids. So it was just easiest to be like, hey, we got a hot and ready.
Okay, we know you're not throwing them under the bus completely here.
Right.
For me, it was Lunchables. Lunchables was something I wanted so bad, and my dad was just like, no, this is terrible. This is bad for you. It looks like shit, tastes like shit. I was like, I don't care. It's in my brain. I have to have Lunchable.
Was this pre-veganism?
Yes, this was pre-veganism. Even when I wouldn't put the cheese on. It was just like the bread and the terrible spaghetti sauce. That was like, it was just the action of doing it. I don't know. I had to have it, even though I couldn't eat half of it.
Gave you a sense of independence.
Yeah, exactly. They really got me. See, they're trying to inculcate labor into you with that. It's like, oh, make your own pizza. You know, they want you.
Oh, yeah.
No, those ones.
The Lunchable is the Fordist model. It's standardized. It's homogenized.
It sucks.
It's one task.
That's really more of a cottage industry.
Yeah, and these companies will run child psychology to figure out what colors appeal most to babies and toddlers and whatnot. Their ideal customer is 8 years old because it's young enough that their palates haven't formed, but it's old enough that you have 65 good years of consumer left in you, which is so grim to think about. And it's this horrible feedback loop of as society gets worse in measurable ways, these companies find ways to exploit it. So my favorite bit of this chapter that I was laughing aloud at, just at how grim and dystopian it was advertising in schools. So schools are underfunded and they need to close budget shortfalls. There's a Colorado school district that lets Burger King advertise on their high school buses and in their school, and then they make Coca-Cola the school's official beverage supplier.
What chance do you have? You're on the school bus and you're forced to look at Coca-Cola and Burger King ads so that the school board can meet their budget shortfall.
Yeah, these companies realize that children are legally required to be in school. So they're a captive market. That's 7 hours a day, 150 days a year. But there was no advertising. There was no promotion. There was no market research. And the only pro argument you can make is that the school districts need this money. But the solution is never fund the fucking schools. The solution is let the fast food companies advertise.
In Florida public schools, they did $1 million contracts with Coca-Cola to have vending machines in the schools themselves. So we had dozens of Coca-Cola Powerade vending machines that subsidized our terrible education.
And I just want to read this quote directly. This passage is so grim and made me laugh. Discover your own river of revenue at the schoolhouse gates, urged a brochure at the 1997 Kids Power Marketing Conference. Whether it's first graders learning to read or teenagers shopping for their first car, we can guarantee an introduction of your product and your company to these students in the traditional setting of the classroom.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Imagine the Kids Power Marketing Conference.
I hope they got fed some poison food. And yeah, these companies have even gotten into making textbooks because textbooks are expensive for schools. And yeah, it goes exactly as you think it would. So Procter & Gamble had a textbook called Decision Earth that said that clear-cut logging was actually good for the environment. Exxon made some textbooks that said fossil fuels created no problems and the alternatives were too expensive. And the American Coal Foundation made a science study guide that said that the Earth could benefit rather than be harmed from increased carbon dioxide.
That's a Simpsons joke. Did Lionel Hutz do these Exxon infomercials?
Now turn to the next problem. If you have 3 Pepsis and drink 1, how much more refreshed are you? You, the redhead in the Chicago school system?
Pepsi?
Partial credit.
Isaac, you mentioned the fact that your school was sponsored by Coca-Cola. This book focuses quite a bit on soda facts, how much soda we are now drinking compared to how much we were in the 70s. It said that from 1978 to 2000, teenagers have tripled their soda intake from 7 ounces a day to 21 ounces a day, which is insane.
It was better back in the day, like in England, when people were just drinking gin and beer because that was the most potable water source. Now, there's nothing romantic about drinking soda. Being an alcoholic, I respect that. But being like a soda addict, Jesus Christ.
A Mountain Dew guy?
Yeah, the average American currently drinks 56 gallons of soda a year, which is 612 cans per person per American.
Oh, God.
Soda, insanely high profit margin. Once you've worked in a restaurant and seen where it comes from, like the syrup bag, I think you're permanently just like, this is 7 cents worth of soda. Like, why am I paying so much for soda? That's my main issue with the soda.
Man, you just haven't tried one of those suicides yet. You know, you do all the different sodas and the. Yeah.
So moving on from marketing to children, which was grim enough, Giordano mentioned that it's not your fault. This food has been chemically designed to appeal to you. And this gets to the exciting world of flavor science. Whenever you freeze or can or preserve food in some way, there's a leaching of flavor that happens. So in order to make processed food taste good, you need to add chemicals to make it taste a particular way.
Yeah, and we learned that there's a real-world flavor town in central New Jersey, one stretch of the Turnpike, in which there's a bunch of different industrial labs where they develop flavors like strawberry and beef, and it's made with hundreds of chemicals. It's titrated, and they have elaborate sensors to determine all of the features of this flavor.
Yeah, if you read any ingredient for something you eat, the final or second last ingredient is going to be either natural flavors or artificial flavors. And all of this comes from these labs in New Jersey, where Eric Schlosser tours one of these places and he has to sign NDAs because everybody's fucking using these things. And they use all of these different fields of science. Like, here's what I mean when I say it's designed with science. It means the flavor industry are using biology, psychology, physiology, and organic chemistry to design these flavors. They're running numbers on where taste comes from, how much of it is taste buds, how much of it is aroma, how do we target these things. They monitor the faces of babies after they feed them particular flavors to see how the human body reacts to shit. And they're trying to quantify, they're trying to spreadsheet something like cooking. And Giordano and I disagreed a little bit about this because I think of cooking and I think of like an Italian nonna with the apron covered in dust, putting her heart and soul into something. And here we got these spreadsheet dorks who use basically a robotic mouth with sensors to measure mouthfeel. It's a device called the Universal TAXT2 Texture Analyzer that calculates the following properties of food: the bounce, the crisp, the breaking point, the density, the crunchiness, the chewiness, the gumminess, the lumpiness, the rubberiness, the springiness, the slipperiness, the smoothness, the softness, the wetness, the juiciness, the spreadability, the springback, and the tackiness.
Right. And so this thing has, hundreds of sensors to measure things like the bounce back, the tackiness, the spreadability. And they're optimizing on the flavors that you eat in a French fry, for example, to make it as delicious as possible. And I was doing a little Socratic irony yesterday and being like, isn't this a good thing? Like, if we had a centrally planned, nationalized food industry, would it be a problem that they're optimizing on the bounce back of the fries? Because I think my answer is no. But it's the fact that McDonald's is doing it to profit off of you and taking advantage of the fact that you're a child. That's the problem.
Taking advantage of the lizard part of your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the Ivan Drago style of food design from Rocky IV.
Right. You're advocating more for how Rocky trained in Rocky IV, where it's like more rustic, the way that we make food.
Yeah.
You know who should get a hold of this robotic mouth? Maybe is like the Fleshlight company, you know?
Oh, it's already got it, dude. I've seen it.
The McDonald's Fleshlight.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Yeah, and these companies in New Jersey rake in like $1.4 billion a year in revenue, making their fucking science chemicals to get you addicted to poison.
Are you guys ready to eat the bugs, though? Aren't these the ones who are going to save us in the near climate catastrophic futures? If they can flavor bug patties pretty good, that sounds like could be a net positive.
I've been ready to eat bugs. I'm excited to eat bugs. I feel like it's a very underused form of protein. In Korea, you go to a bar, they serve you a bunch of maggots. You know, it's like a...
All right, I didn't think we were going to get racist here. Come on, man.
That's what happened to me when I was there. Maybe they were trying to insult
the wrong
me.
Place, man.
Okay, well, let's move on to fast food and Fordism and labor, because what McDonald's is Fordism brought to fast food, right? All of the food is made in an assembly line style where one person has a single task to do, and these tasks have been heavily refined at corporate headquarters to involve as little deviation as possible from the way that the labor was intended to be done, so that everything is standardized.
Yep, no more line cooks. Laborers are as replaceable as cogs in a machine. And this means that you require as little training as possible. It also means that the product that you're selling has to be standardized and homogenized. So everything is shipped to a fast food restaurant from someplace else, frozen in a bag, and you are just assembling that thing in the restaurant.
Yeah. And people say that Americans have no culture, and I think they're wrong. It's just harder to recognize it. Because you see an Italian restaurant in America, and you're like, oh, they got the friggin' pepperoni hanging and the music playing and the waiters are trying to fuck me. And that's easily recognizable Italian culture. But like if you go to the McDonald's in Rome, you have to go to the kitchen to see the American culture, right? It's the forced labor application of how the food is made that's the American ethos manifested into the form of food. It's not necessarily the ingredients.
You're telling me that the guy at Wendy's has not tried to fuck you before? Because there's always one of them when I go.
I've never had the pleasure.
Yeah. Hey, you're not Wendy.
This was intentional and by design, and they made no attempt to hide it in the 50s and 60s as these restaurants were getting off the ground. The guy who started Hardee's originally had a real restaurant, and he had all these overheads. You have to wash the dishes. What if we replaced it with paper wrappers? What if we got rid of cutlery altogether? What if we limited the menu to only shit that you can eat with your hands? And as these restaurants crop up, they have advertising where originally Burger King was called Insta Burger King, and they would brag that they had the miracle Insta machines to make milkshakes. And in their like advertisements to franchisees or whatever, they would say these machines have been thoroughly perfected. They are of foolproof design and can be easily operated even by a moron.
That was their official statement.
Yeah, and I think it's the 1950s, so they're using moron in like a medical capacity.
Right, they said moron, and someone was like, oh, they're such an SJW for not saying nincompoop. But yeah, I was shocked to find out from reading this book that a lot of these fast food restaurants just expect to have 300% employee turnover in a year. Like, you need these people to be as replaceable and fireable as possible. It's like built into the economics of how the food is made.
Yeah, you need teenagers that you can pay not even minimum wage, but less than minimum wage. They lobbied for a loophole to the minimum wage laws because they're children, they're teenagers. They get even less than minimum wage.
And this didn't happen necessarily in the 2000s alone, but it is just an ongoing process for how McDonald's does things. Canadians will remember that in the mid-2000s, Tim Hortons was acquired by 3G Capital. And once you're owned by a larger, just capital-owning firm that is only concerned with paying back the debt that they got to acquire Tim Hortons, everything was shifted to this frozen model. Everything gets sent in frozen and served as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, well, while there are very few fast food workers dying in industrial accidents, it's still a pretty dangerous job with suboptimal working conditions. 4 or 5 fast food workers are killed on the job every month, which makes it a more dangerous job than police officer. Critical support for the thin bread line.
Have you heard the horror stories about people getting locked in the freezer?
Yes.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, that happened recently.
Yeah, I think it was a
right?
Chipotle or something.
The book describes a horrifying scene in which somebody robs a Chuck E. Cheese and kills the teenagers working at the Chuck E. Cheese, robs it, and the police show up later to a bunch of dead teenagers at an empty Chuck E. Cheese, except the mechanical band is still playing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and wouldn't you know it, most armed robberies of fast food restaurants are actually done by disgruntled employees. And there's this macabre scene in the book where at one of these conferences, one voice says, if we improve conditions, maybe they wouldn't turn around to do inside jobs. And he's just shouted down. It's like, no.
Like Michael Moore at the Oscars in 2003.
It has always been very telling to me, or one of the more frustrating facets of American society is that, yeah, the disgruntled worker, the poor, they don't rise up against their masters. They go and freak out that there are no more chicken nuggets and they kill the McDonald's cashier.
Yeah, and of course, unsurprisingly, all these fast food companies are huge in union busting. There's a story from the book where McDonald's just illegally administered polygraph tests at some of their sites. And then, of course, denied after the fact. But there has never been a unionized McDonald's. I think maybe there was one where they voted to found a union. And then before they could actually get the paperwork done, McDonald's just pulled the franchise to make sure that you will never be organized.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, a lot here on how we've brought the factory floor to McDonald's kitchen. This is what makes McDonald's so American, is not necessarily like the food that it sells, but the way in which the food is made and the labor relationship occurs. Like you're making cars in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt Chrisman has a great rant about the McDonald's brothers as capitalists versus Ray Kroc. But maybe we'll talk more about that in our McDonald's episode.
Isaac, do you know what a crock is? Giordano didn't.
I know what a crock is, like a crock pot.
A crock in the 19th century was what you shat in. It's like a container for shit.
Yeah, but that's the same crock. They're referring to the same object.
Yeah, that's what you'd ferment your food in back in the day.
I don't think they use the same crocks for cooking and shitting.
The expression is a crock of shit.
Okay.
That's what I call him. I call him Ray Crock of shit.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Get his ass.
Okay, let's move on to urbanism. One of my favorite topics. Big urbanist over here. Ride your bike, people. Get hit by cars. It's good for you. I've been hit by cars 3 times. It makes you stronger. So many elements of our food production or distribution are either dependent on shitty land use or they make our land use worse. And most of these fast food chains, and especially McDonald's, come from Southern California, which is the birthplace of American car-dependent infrastructure.
Yeah, this book goes to great lengths. It even opens with the 1950s in California, showing you how these fast food restaurants were taking advantage of the newly highly subsidized Highway Act, which basically subsidized car travel for everybody in the country. And, it's no coincidence that both McDonald's and the Hells Angels were incorporated in Southern California.
The yin and yang of America from San Bernardino, California.
They're perfect for an industry where, like I said, 70% of fast food trips are spontaneous. They need to be beside the highway. They need to be at major intersections. It always reminds me of that meme of the woman saying, "I love America. I love the American way of life." And it's just like the beautiful hills of West Virginia, but with 1,000 fast food restaurants.
Mm-hmm. They've got to have the giant sign on the pole. It has to be visible as fuck. It needs to be on a highway off-ramp so that you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
When they bought out the McDonald's brothers, they thought about dropping the golden arches. And there was a psychologist there who said, no, you can't drop the golden arches. The golden arches are breasts. And from a Freudian perspective,
I thought they were nuts. I thought they were testicles, but I guess that just says more about me. 2 penises.
Well, we know what Freud would say about that.
Sometimes an arch is just an arch. Yeah, and these fast food companies, they love integration. They love synergy. If they're positioning themselves at very busy intersections or next to Strodes or off the highway, you need a fucking drive-through. Right? They're this barnacle on car-dependent suburbia. So they build off of sprawl. They build these giant signs to attract their motorists. And it's this weird thing where at a certain point, they're actually not just leeching off of this, but they're leading car-dependent infrastructure and pointing the way. I mean, everybody knows that McDonald's is not really in the restaurant business. It's the real estate business because the company owns the land and they lease it out to franchisees. And these companies will use shit like GIS, which is geo mapping software, to look at where subdivisions are going to go. Like they're planning the fucking invasion of Normandy. Be like, there, that's where we need one. Look, it's at an intersection and it's next to a school.
Yes. Schlosser outlines in the book how they'll look at subdivisions that are under construction and calculate how many people are going to live there, how many children are going to live there, and then determine, like, okay, how big does the McDonald's need to be to serve this community? So, yeah, one more check in the it's not your fault bucket. Ever since your parents got a mortgage for a pre-built subdivision, the McDonald's already had their eyes on you.
Yeah. Ray Kroc would fly personally in a Cessna over land back in the 50s to look for schools like a fucking predator. And then later these companies would fly in helicopters over shit. So the helicopter continues this trend of being the most evil vehicle in existence.
We need a predator drone that identifies when you need barbecue sauce. The McDonald's barbecue predator drone.
this is not even to mention, if you want to talk about urbanism, the horrible land use behind agricultural production, where there's a whole chapter on ranching in Colorado. And we have these massive suburban sprawls in Colorado, which is a very fast growing state that's pushing ranchers off their land for this sprawl, and meaning that any independent rancher is gone and all of the cattle is going to be raised by some of the mega conglomerates. And this, of course, has the knock-on climate effects of these places are being built up without any kind of fucking zoning, which is leading to forest fires and flooding and all the ecological catastrophes that we're seeing and are going to be exacerbated by climate change. Climate change is real, yes, and we have built horrendously over the past 100 years since the car's been around.
Fast food doesn't inherently need drivers. You can operate a McDonald's in an urban center with no drive-through, and it would take away some of these costs. But the reason why I think Ben and I both hate cars is that I find them to be an intensely antisocial way of traveling. I find that it is alienating to be in a car. I mean, the fact that we have road rage, the fact that just operating a car and doing the same thing as other people will make you want to kill them.
No, they're doing it worse than me, Giordano.
It's because they're doing it worse than me. I think is proof that like driving a car is alienating. There's no such thing as walking rage. You're never like walking and like, oh, I fucking want to kill everybody else who's walking.
What are you talking about? You live in New York City. The I'm walking over here thing. Come on.
That's because a car almost hit him in that scene. That's why he yells, I'm walking here.
I missed that part, I guess. I've never seen it. Was that from a movie? I don't even know.
Dustin Hoffman. He slams his hands on the car.
Hey, I'm walking here. I'm walking here. Up yours, you son of a bitch. You don't talk me that way. Get out of here.
Yeah, so I just find that cars are an inherently alienating part of our life, and the fact that all of our transportation revolves around cars, especially outside of the cities, fucking makes you alienated and hate everybody. And fast food places cater to this, but they don't have to. I'm reading a lot about McDonald's in other countries, and they rarely do fucking drive-thrus. Because what I've come to learn is that McDonald's in every other country is always better. It is like so much less alienating because McDonald's localizes itself so well that it is a reflection of your culture. The McDonald's that you get is the one you deserve.
The only good drive-through is the ones in New Orleans where you can get a cocktail. That's the only acceptable form of drive-through is alcohol.
Yeah, respect for the drive-through daiquiri,
Yeah.
where they put a little piece of tape over the straw, which means that legally it is a closed container.
That's very Talmudic of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anything else to say about the drive-through? I know that you were excited earlier.
Oh, yeah, I was super excited. No, I just think that it's spiritually bereft to do things in your car. I mean,
right.
I think the only acceptable one, maybe drive-through movie theaters, that was kind of cool. I can get behind that, maybe.
The idea is you're going with someone, I think, you know.
Yeah,
The idea is that you're
maybe
getting
you can
a
have
hand
sex
job
or something.
outside
I don't
in
know.
the 1950s from your best gal.
Your sweetheart.
Your sweetheart.
But I think about the Simpsons episode where Homer gets to design his own car, and like it's like the perfect fast food vehicle. I've driven very long distances, and every time I've ever had to eat at a fast food restaurant, I would still get out of the car to go get the food because you're gonna be waiting there probably the same amount of time, and just like sitting is just bad for you, you know. So I was thinking about like all the oil in your car. People have so many bugs in their cars they don't even know, and I'm sure it's all from fucking fast food crumbs. So it's like, yeah, we're living in our filth. Get out of your fucking car, please.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at the very least, go into the restaurant and
Yes.
order. Look at the teenager in the eye.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason for the road rage, Giordano, that you feel is that implicitly, even if you're not actively thinking it, subconsciously, you know that something like 45,000 people in America are killed every year in motor vehicle accidents. So you are a little bit tense. You are a little bit keyed up, I think, implicitly. That you know that you're doing something a little bit dangerous.
Right.
I do love texting and driving. I think that this all is a consequence of automatic transmissions. If you had a stick shift, you couldn't so easily eat in your car while you're driving. Like people stuffing their face with fucking cancer burgers, driving with their knees, dripping mayonnaise down their chin. Whenever I see someone eating in their car and driving, that is disgusting to me. Like, what are you doing?
That must be on the flag in Florida.
Amongst other things, yeah.
All right, now let's move on to the real fucking meat of this episode, the agricultural industry. This is the growing and the making of food. So this is where the book got truly hellish.
Right. I'll give sort of a high-level overview of what we're going to be talking about here, but basically, say what you want about fast food. At least there's a plethora of fast food options, right? And by a plethora, I mean there's like 8.
There's 8 that are owned by 4 companies.
Yeah. But in the food production industry, this is where we have a very intense amount of concentration, basically an oligopoly. We've gone from 1972, the top 4 food companies controlling about 23% of beef production, to 85% today. And what we learn in this book is that this has happened to every type of food production, from chickens to corn, agriculture, slaughterhouses. There's like 4 companies, and there's a bunch of associated problems with them having this much market power. And this includes corn subsidies, them being able to fight regulations, which leads to E. coli outbreaks, patents around seeds, and the exploitation of workers in our country that have the least amount of political agency.
Yeah. So there's a chapter on ranching that points out that, like, once upon a time in like the fucking 40s and 50s, Americans wanted to be ranchers. Most of the shows were westerns. And now the independent rancher is basically a dying breed. Ranching is run by this cabal of companies who collude to keep the price of beef down. The price of beef has, I believe, been falling since the 70s for a whole host of reasons. From 1980 to 2000, 500,000 ranchers just sold their cattle, sold their property, quit the industry entirely as this market consolidation happens. And there are all of these problems that are related to this market consolidation. Like the price of land is going up, price of beef is going down. There's an oversupply of cattle. After NAFTA, they're importing live cattle from Canada and Mexico. There's suburban sprawl. There's fucking inheritance taxes, because you had this vision of the ranching family handing down the land, fucking Kevin Costner in Yellowstone or whatever, that's getting hit. And then there's health scares around beef like mad cow. But the biggest problem is, of course, the meatpacking industry.
Yeah, and I think the main point here is that it's very ironic that this is one of the most quintessential American figures, right? The cattle rancher, the fucking cowboy, right? And we've made it so that there's like 4 cattle ranching companies now.
We have mergered and acquisitioned the cowboy out of existence, right?
Right.
It's gone now. And this is intimately tied to fast food, because McDonald's, as recently as 1967, bought their beef from 175 different local suppliers. And just a few years later, neoliberalism, it's down to 5. The market concentration in beef is at the highest level since record keeping began. And yeah, these few independent ranchers we have left are getting totally squeezed by just artificial price gouging and price fixing. I didn't really understand the ins and outs because I was reading it very quickly, but the metaphor Eric Schlosser uses is, imagine if the New York Stock Exchange would function where large investors could keep the terms of all of their stock trades secret, but ordinary investors would have no idea what their own stocks were worth. The wealthy would obviously be able to exploit that. And yeah, you see it with a knock-on of fucking rancher suicides in these areas, like deaths of despair.
Florida has a very long history of cattle ranching. We were at one point the largest producer of beef in the country.
Wow.
I've actually been spending a lot of time with cattle ranchers here in Florida. I even did like a ceremonial cattle drive where we drove cows about 80 miles around the state of Florida, like the last bits of wild Florida. The ranchers in Florida here are actually the premier conservationists in the state. It's their vast acres of land that keep Florida from being developed. But like everywhere else, you do have the problem of the matriarch dies, the splits between the family, and then the kids are offered an ungodly amount of money by these evil developers. And the largest rancher in the state of Florida are the Mormons. They bought 330,000 acres just south of St. John's River, and they're about to convert 130,000 of that into homes. So it is dwindling. That will be the end of Florida if we lose our ranchers here.
Yeah, the book talks a bit about that too, where the Colorado ranchers, the few independent ones that are left, are huge into conservation and land use. And there are some ticky-tacky reforms to try and save this, where you can pay a bunch of money to the state to get a historical preservation easement on your land. But it's so onerous that the only people who can do it are the quote-unquote ranchers who are actually doctors and dentists and run ranching as a side gig. But if you are actually trying to make your money from ranching, there's no way you could actually afford to preserve your land.
I think we owe Ammon Bundy and his standoff with BLM,
Right.
the bad BLM. I don't know which BLM's worse. with his standoff against the Bureau of Land Management for his cattle. So maybe we should, one of those things where the leftists were wrong for the first time.
Yeah. We're sorry we called you Y'all Qaeda on Twitter, okay?
That is so sick. That's a great shirt idea. I got to do that.
And if you do want to read about Isaac's cattle drive in Florida, you do have an article about that, right?
Yeah, I have an article about the cattle drive. I also just did a book that came out about it in Cracker Culture.
Would you like to plug it now?
It's like a little self-published vanity project. I don't care if you buy it.
Why don't you start with the title?
It's called The Great Florida Cattle Drive.
Okay,
that's it. I'd rather you subscribe to my podcast, honestly. But yeah, I love the Florida cowboys, cow hunters, crackers, actually. We're taking back cracker. All right, that's a good word now.
Yeah, let's move on to the chicken production industry then.
Yeah, I don't want to get into all the nitty-gritty details, but the long and the short of it is they got it even worse than the beef ranchers because they are contractor serfs to these highly consolidated companies. So here's how it works. Company like Tyson, who gave us motherfucking Tucker Carlson, supplies its growers with one-day-old chicks. Between the day that the chicks are born and the day that they're killed, the birds spend their entire lives on the grower's property, but they belong to Tyson. Possession is not, in fact, 9/10 of the law. The company supply the feed, the veterinary services, and the tech support. The company determines the feeding schedule, demands the equipment upgrades, employs flock supervisors to make sure the directives are being followed. But the chicken grower supplies the land, the labor, the poultry houses, and the fuel. All of these chicken growers are enormously in debt, and they frequently go bust. The book says that the back roads of Arkansas are just littered with these abandoned chicken houses. In order to even get the bank loan to build your chicken facilities, you need to have the agreement signed with Tyson's in advance. So you are in just a form of debt bondage while you raise these chickens.
Yeah, it reminded me so much of feudalism. We've just gone back to feudalism. And it's not feudalism in the sense that these chicken farmers have pledged their military support for Tyson in the case of a dynastic struggle, but more in the sense that there's just this long chain of contracts and subcontracts where if you're a chicken farm and you're basically operating the same way, but 8 layers above you, the chickens are owned by Tyson. You're a chicken farmer, you own none of the chickens.
You're right, Giordano. It's not feudal in the sense that you've pledged your bannerman to your liege lord. It is kind of fucked up that Tyson's gets prima nocte night with your family, though.
Yeah, that chapter was really fucked up.
Prima bocarte.
Tucker Carlson shows up and he's like, it says here in the contract that I get to have sex with your wife.
That's not the Tucker Carlson voice.
That's what he sounded like when he was younger. Food Inc. goes on a tour of a chicken grower who allows cameras in to be filmed, and they know that they're going to be punished by Tyson or Purdue. And she's like, they've already told me not to do this. But a lot of these farmers are like pretty independent in spirit. And they're like, I don't care. People need to see what's going on. So it's one of the few American agricultural centers that we get a tour of. And it's horrifying, right? It's disgusting. Most of her daily job includes grabbing all of the chicken corpses that are left on the floor and like removing them. The chickens cannot stand because their breasts are so large. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the chicken coops that we saw? The 21st century chicken coops?
I mean, having too big of tits and not being able to stand that's hot, right? That's the American that's the American style. Yeah, no, I mean, it's tough, especially because chickens, I mean, if you look into the eye of a cow, there's a lot more going on there. I do believe in like a hierarchy of souls. Like some animals just have more soulfulness than others. And I think we've rendered chickens to appear soulless, but if you've ever like had like a cool pet chicken, they're actually quite sweet and friendly and have personalities. And yeah, just seeing these chickens suffer, for whatever reason, we have a greater stomach for it, I guess. Watching Food Inc. almost 2 decades after the fact, it's almost quaint in comparison now. Like it's just not as shocking as it once was. We have normalized this kind of industry, and it's based now, actually. It's fucking based to murder chickens and breed them to not have souls or something like that.
I mean, have you seen the video going around Twitter of them just culling entire fields with a chemical foam that pours over this endless field of chickens because of the avian flu? It's pretty harrowing.
They're killing like a 300,000 birds in a single sitting. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Jesus. So yeah, one more industry that I think was a really interesting highlight from the book was corn subsidies. Because these agricultural companies are so strong, they're able to lobby to grow corn for above its market price. Imagine corn on the open market costs $1 an ear. They can produce it for $2. So it's like they're technically losing money on the corn, but the government has subsidized the growing of corn so much that you can produce way more of it than the market is actually asking for. And what this results in is one, like obviously like a bunch of profits for the corn growers, but two, all this extra fucking corn that we have no idea what to do with.
Oh, let's put it in our car. Remember when they were trying to figure out to put corn in our car? That's crazy.
Yeah, let's send it to Mexico under the free trade. I don't know how like a free trade agreement also has subsidies for locally grown product. I thought that's not how that was supposed to work, but it basically means that it puts all of the corn growers in Mexico out of a job, which means that a lot of them become the migrants that we're going to talk about shortly. But it also means that like, okay, let's just put it in all the food. Turn it into syrup, put it in everything. Put it in cereal, put it in bread, put it in chips, anything, corn syrup. It's like the most distinctive part of the American palate. You come to this country and everything is sweet. Everything has fucking sugar in it. I don't like sugar, and it's in everything here.
And you also feed it to animals.
Yeah, animals that have no business eating it.
Yeah, corn is such a highly domesticated crop that if you snapped your fingers and humanity went away, corn would disappear the next year. There are probably some strands of wild corn around still, but the corn that you think about is so domesticated and so dependent on humans that it would disappear.
They're like the chickens whose breasts are so large that they can't stand up.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And so you don't need to be a fucking biologist to realize that cows are not supposed to eat this corn and it's very bad for them. That's pretty bad, but I get it. We have all this extra corn lying around. Why not? The fact that they found a way to feed corn to fish, again, not a marine biologist, but I know there's no fucking corn down there.
Cows have 4 stomachs for breaking down grass. And it turns out that when you ask them to break down corn, it doesn't biologically work the same way. And it results in like a lot of E. coli. But let's move on to the slaughterhouse industry. This is, I think, probably the largest focus of the book, or it's just the one that's stuck in my mind the most because it is by far the most horrifying part of the food chain. Who would have thought the most evil people typically will be drawn to an industry like this?
Yeah.
Well, the people who run it, not the employees necessarily.
Right. No, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like the most dangerous job in America and worked by people with no political recourse at all when they're hurt.
Yeah. What I didn't realize is that when you slaughter a chicken, because chickens are so standardized, partially by biology, partially thanks to breeding, you can have the machines do a lot of the killing and the breaking down for you, but there's so much variation in a cow that can vary by hundreds of pounds that this is all still done by hand. The industrial part of this farming is really just the conveyor belts that move the meat around at insanely high speeds, but all of the actual harvesting, I guess, processing of the beef is done by people with knives by hand. And so there are a million injuries, mostly stab wounds, accidentally cutting yourself, accidentally cutting others, carpal tunnel, stuff related to your tendons. There are some large machines like grinders that people get stuck in. You need to physically put on chainmail, like a chainmail apron and chainmail gloves, because there are so many knives flying around in this place.
I'm just sick of them taking American jobs, you know? Like that's Americans should have to injure themselves and just be like soaked to the bone with the blood of animals.
The world would be such a better place if we had a Cultural Revolution style program where every American had to briefly do the job of someone who's an undocumented migrant.
Yeah, I agree.
And yeah, once again, we see the Fordist model applied, which is you have one task, right? You're the kidney remover. Your job is to remove the kidneys. You're making the same cut on the cow each and every single day.
Yeah, and there's a line, right? That's what makes it explicitly Fordist. There is a line and you're doing the same repetitive task over and over and over again. This was the original subject of the original Uptown Sinclair muckraking book. The Jungle was about the meatpacking industry. And thankfully, I don't know if because of that book or because of a larger cultural trend, there was unionization that happened in the meatpacking industry, right?
And they were all based out of the big cities. That's why we still talk about meatpacking districts, because before the car, you could only move shit around by train. And the biggest train yards were in the cities. So you move the meat to Chicago from the plains, you got a whole bunch of people there to break it down, and then you ship it back out. And these are just relics. I want to mention on an aside here that Giordano read the book just in audiobook. I was behind on my homework. And so what I did is I had the audiobook at like 2.5 speed, and I had the physical book, and I read along. And there are massive chunks of this book that have been edited out from the Jeff Bezos run Audible. And every bit that's edited out is the most political example. So the entire passage on the meatpacking unions and their union houses that are these decrepit archaeological sites now, that got cut. A passage about the religious right evangelicals setting up shop in Colorado and their relationship to all this stuff, cut. Right? They defanged a whole bunch of this book when they recorded it for Audible, on an aside.
That's just like what they did with the Avatar sex scene. They got rid of it. Jeff Bezos removed the Avatar fuck scene.
Yes, exactly like that.
And so what we've seen is we're doing a lot of episodes where this is the story, but, you know, we get some level of government intervention during the progressive period, seeing these unionized jobs of a semi-regulated industry. But since the 80s, we've seen massive deregulation, which has resulted in all of these jobs going back to being extremely dangerous, not unionized, exploitable. It's taken a real turn for the worse in the last 50 years, the meatpacking industry. It's gone back to worse than during the Upton Sinclair days.
Yeah, someone working in a meatpacking district post the Upton Sinclair era, it was one of the highest paid manufacturing jobs in America, and it was like a skilled trade. But now they've applied the Fordist model. And sure enough, yes, back in the Uptown Sinclair days in Chicago, they were only processing 25 cows an hour. And now it's up to 450 cows an hour because they put them on these speedy fucking conveyor belts and they don't give a shit about their labor.
And they actually find that a lot of the danger is a result of the speed in which the line is set to run. And he points out in the book that when the meat is destined for export, it has higher regulations, not for safety, but for meat quality, which means they have to slow down the line, and it results in far less injuries. The injuries are not a inevitable part of the process. It's driven by the speed and the need to optimize and be as profitable as possible. The book goes to great lengths to show how so much of worker safety has been pinned on the laborer themselves. Safety is your responsibility, right? It's an insane thought because the safety of the situation is driven by how fast you're trying to go and how profitable you're trying to be.
Yeah, no, you hear the same stories coming out of Amazon packing centers, right? It's just all these people who are just worked at unreasonable speeds and injuring themselves. So yeah, it's becoming commonplace throughout.
Yeah, and these companies, they moved out of the cities into the rural South and the rural Midwest, and they import undocumented laborers. And what's so fucking galling is that they will say with a straight face, we have never knowingly hired an undocumented laborer. Meanwhile, they are advertising Spanish language ads in Mexico. They run a bus service from Mexico City to sites in rural America. And yeah, they just fucking lie, and it doesn't matter.
Florida here, we have one of the largest tomato farms, some of the largest tomato farms. They're in Immokalee, which is like around quite South Florida. And you'll always know a migrant van when you see it. It's like a completely white school bus just filled with migrant laborers. And the conditions under which they have to work are absolutely atrocious. The amount of sexual assault that occurs, and these people have no recourse whatsoever. And to boot, it's getting worse, but it was the same under Biden, it's the same under Obama, constant ICE raids. These people were always sacrificed. They would sacrifice a handful of workers, and the Food Inc. did show that there was a kind of like handshake deal between the government and these massive agricultural industries that would be like, okay, yeah, here, take a few of these guys, but not enough to really fuck up our quotas here. Half of all agricultural workers in the state of Florida are undocumented migrants.
Wow. Yeah, it's just like the horror of these undocumented workers coming to America to fill this labor need that we're advertising in Mexico or in Central America, and then being subject to like these extremely dangerous jobs where people are regularly hurt. He tells a story of one gentleman who like hurt his back. Like, I hurt my back doing labor that
Sneezing.
like isn't very physically demanding, right? And so now you're on a factory floor, you're dealing with 1,000-pound carcasses and meat grinders, and he hurt his back. And yeah, the company's response was basically, fuck you. Like, what are you going to do? And then, he couldn't work anymore. As an undocumented worker who can't speak English, you're going to sue Tyson? Good luck. You're basically just left to die. by these companies because this is another industry where, because it's the Fordist model, they have 300% turnover. Get another one. Your back's fucked up. Not my problem anymore. Eric Schlosser goes to great lengths to describe the worst job in the slaughterhouse, which are the people who clean it overnight with chemicals, describing like the boiling hot water and like lung-searing chemicals that they are subjected to every single night to then be paid less than minimum wage with no employee protections at all.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to corporate capture / the limits of regulation. So in every single chapter of Fast Food Nation, there will be some kind of aside on the problem he's describing about an attempt to regulate whatever he's talking about and how impotent our regulatory state is. Surely, we shouldn't market to children, right? In 1978, the Federal Trade Commission tried to ban all television advertising to 7 years or younger. It was supported by the American Academy of Pediatrics, the National Congress of Parents and Teachers, the Consumers Union, the Child Welfare League. Ronald Reagan's is elected in 1980. We're kiboshing that. No, you can advertise to kids. That's fine. I forget the stupid name of their lobbying group, but there's one that has restaurant in the title, like the United fucking Restaurant League or something like that, have constantly lobbied to keep the minimum wage low and even lower it for teenagers. And these motherfuckers, they get tax breaks for creating low-skilled jobs that's numbered in the hundreds of millions. Taco Bell is getting hundreds of millions of your tax dollars for being job creators, even when their jobs have a 300% turnover, thanks to their ability to lobby the government. That's without even talking about OSHA or the FDA.
Right. Isaac, have you ever heard of the term starve the beast? It was like a Reagan-era mantra for like how to get rid of these government programs.
I'm unfamiliar.
So like instead of just saying like, okay, let's get rid of OSHA, which would cause a public uproar, the solution for a lot of Reagan's plans just meant let's not fund it. Let's not fund the FDA so that they don't have enough man hours to do inspections, right? Or the same thing for OSHA. And so you're not directly getting rid of it like they did with abortion. You can sort of indirectly get rid of it. So like OSHA, they defunded it to the point where you could expect an inspection from them once every 80 years.
Actually, Giordano, I need to jump in with a correction. It's worse than that. When Reagan was elected, that's how underfunded OSHA was. It could only inspect once every 80 years, and then Reagan made it worse than that.
Right. Yeah, he made it so that you can't even show up unannounced. They switched to a model of voluntary compliance, so that you're just expected to be in compliance unless there's a complaint. There will be no more inspections. The idea that the government is not allowed to inspect for workplace safety or the FDA, like for E. coli, is insane.
It's communism.
That's communism, right?
Yeah, they said that we are only going to investigate places based off of their safety logs. And like, who keeps the safety logs? It's the actual meatpacking industries. There's so many examples, not just of corruption and regulatory capture in this book, but just fucking crime and lying. So this company just kept 2 sets of injury logs. They had a paper trail of like, here is the one that we will show to OSHA. And here is the one that we absolutely must not show to OSHA. It was like 10 times as many injuries as they were reporting. Even the regulation that we get is so toothless and ticky-tacky.
Yeah. Reagan appointed the country's largest hog farmer, I believe, is the FDA head. Like Trump, right? Appointing the people who don't even believe that the organization should exist.
I think that was one of the things that felt so quaint about rewatching Food Inc. in the Trump 2.0 era is it just seems so cute, you know, where it's just like, oh, you are appointing this lobbyist, the head of the FDA, as though that would be of any shock to us today. It's just like, it's so commonplace now.
We're so black-pilled, I feel like. You know, there was a beef provider who got convicted of selling tainted meat to the government, and specifically he was providing 1/4 of all beef to the U.S. school system and got caught selling tainted beef from a lack of safety standards. And the United States government kept buying beef from this guy, and it happened again. And before they could bring him to trial, he killed himself. So the free market works.
He was actually visited by 3 ghosts the night before, and all 3 ghosts said, fucking end it, dude.
So he made himself a burger and ate it of his own meat.
He put himself into the beef supply.
Yeah, and there's a whole chapter on E. coli outbreaks in the book where this is a new strand of E. coli. It is a new disease, like as new as something like AIDS. And its vector of transmission is so bad because of how we have set up our supply chains and our restaurants, because of factory industrialized farming. If you, back in the day, went to your local butcher to get some ground beef, there would be beef from maybe 2, maybe 3 cows, whatever cuts were left over after you made the steaks and shit, you put it through the grinder in the back and there's your ground beef. But the average pound of ground beef has beef from dozens of cows. So the amount of fucking shit in the meat has increased exponentially, and the vectors of distribution are so much higher.
Right. The main point was not only is E. coli more present because the cows are eating corn, which they're not supposed to, and because the conditions at the slaughterhouse are disgusting and they're operating too fast to clean the shit off of the carcasses, but also that because there's like 4 meat suppliers, if they find E. coli in the meat and they have to do a recall, the recall reach is like a quarter of the country. It used to be that if you had E. coli with one butcher, he could affect a town. But now when we have an E. coli outbreak, it affects the entire country because this is how our production system is set up. And not only that, but the shit from the slaughterhouses runs into the water system and gets all over our fucking vegetables, which is why basically nobody wants to buy romaine lettuce anymore because it's like covered in shit.
You shouldn't want to eat romaine lettuce anyway. That is like the most pathetic of all lettuces. At least iceberg has like some texture,
Ooh, I wouldn't go pro iceberg. I'm an arugula man myself.
Yeah, I'm a radicchio guy, but I understand that that's not for everybody. But yeah, he says in the book that at this time, in the year 2000, more people die from foodborne illnesses than drugs, which is no longer true. And it's not because the food has gotten safer, but because we've basically quintupled the number of people who are dying from drugs since 2000.
They're calling opioids the best to ever do it. He's the great one of drugs.
Yeah, it's putting up Gretzky numbers. And he points out that there's no war on salmonella or on E. coli, the same way that other countries like Sweden have done exactly that. So even when we get our wars on concepts like war on terror, war on Christmas, war on drugs, can't we at least get a war on salmonella or something?
That one's better because it's not a concept, it's a thing.
We've done none of our war on ideas, unfortunately. But yeah, a lot of people are dying from E. coli. It's funny reading this book because, one, you want like a burger the entire time you're reading it, unfortunately. Until you get to the E. coli part. And that's where I actually was like, I'm not actually like not going to eat this meat that's a week past its expiry date anymore. I'm a famous food hoarder.
I felt that way watching The Sopranos and Johnny Sack, smoking a cigarette until he finally gets cancer. And then I'm like, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, it culminates in this very interesting flow from this like 1950s, these fast food operators learning how to make the world's most efficient kitchen, to this collection of shit and meat. And one thing that I think the book reinforces is that there's basically shit in a lot of our meat, and we, rather than decide to fix it, we've just decided to cook the meat hotter. That was Jack in the Box's solution when they found that there was a major E. coli outbreak.
Yeah.
All these people eating Jack in the Box got E. coli, and they gestured towards applying the meat better, but they also wanted restaurateurs to make sure that they cooked it to 165 instead of 155. Like, we're just going to cook the shit out of the meat.
It makes it better, right? Overcooking is better. That's right.
Yeah, that's what the president says.
Yeah.
We're now going to talk about the movie Fast Food Nation. So there was this genre in the 2000s of the liberal documentary, right? Your Inconvenient Truths, your Fahrenheit 9/11s, your Super Size Me. And that's definitely what I was expecting when I fired up Fast Food Nation. But then I see, what's this? Directed by Richard Linklater? And instead of this nonfiction genre, what we got is, this fictionalized version of a nonfiction book. And I loved it. I like really enjoyed this movie. I think this is a tough task to incorporate all of these documentary facts into a story about fictional people.
With characters.
Right. What did you guys think of the movie?
I loved it. A friend of ours described it as thank you for smoking, but for fast food.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of that, but this is much more heartbreaking than Thank You for Smoking. In a weird way, it reminded me of Requiem for a Dream in a lot of ways.
I don't know how I felt about it because I have a soft spot for Linklater. I just love the way that he does these slice of life views of ordinary people and ordinary stakes, you know, with like Dazed and Confused or Boyhood. I've just always had a soft spot for that. So I'm not really sure how to trust my own opinion on this movie.
I just got really excited when I saw Wilmer Valderrama in it.
Oh yeah, baby. This movie has a fantastic cast that I'll be shouting out as we describe the plot. We are going to do a plot summary. We're trying to take some of the constructive criticism we got recently, especially for this movie, because I don't think that many people saw it or remember it based on how many people I know that have given it a letterboxd review. But the plot, such that it is, you know, it's got a very sprawling slice of life plot. It's like describing the plot of Dazed and Confused, right? There's basically two main plots. The first involves Greg Kinnear, who's a fast food marketing executive at a fictionalized company called Mickey's. And he's crushing it on the new burger that he's introduced. It's called The Big One. You know, so everybody talks about The Big One, the new burger that's actually going gangbusters in the market right now. And I think that that's kind of like a slight at the type of innovation that we get from having 4 fast food companies. Is we get a new burger called The Big One.
It's bigger.
Yeah. But there's been a university study, however, by the local university. They got a hold of some frozen patties and found that the fecal counts were off the charts. This is a little nod to, you know, a detail in the book where universities are the ones left doing any kind of research into making sure that there's no shit in the meat. And so Greg Kinnear is sent to go investigate the meat suppliers and look into this very sensitive task of seeing what's going on. And so he does some detective work. He meets with a rancher, a very memorable character in this movie, sort of a crazy guy who's really just like a guy who doesn't believe in capitalism. But, you know, we get that view into the ranching industry that we talked about earlier. So through some detective work and because of the very grounded storytelling, we come to find that, yeah, there is shit in the meat and we're just not going to do anything about it, basically. The entire problem that the movie sets up, the solution is like, well, let's just cook the meat higher. And what I love about Richard Linklater is that the through line, I think, for this film is that you have 24 characters and they're all making compromises to the system that they live in. There are some evil characters, but for the most part, everybody is neutral in their morality and they're just making compromises because the incentive structure is capitalism. And everybody is responding to the incentives of that system. And so nobody is really an evil person, but they're all doing something to contribute to this evil system because that's the system that they live in. And I thought that that was a very effective through line.
One of the best scenes in the film is when Greg Kinnear talks with Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis is the guy at the company who negotiated the deal with the filthy meat supplier. And Bruce Willis is perfect in this role. Mm-hmm. He goes on a weird like anti-millennial rant about how Americans are getting soft. And sometimes you just have to eat some shit. And that's all it is. And you think you can find a supplier with a better price without shit in it? It's like the final straw before Greg Kinnear acquiesces.
Right. Because Greg Kinnear, he's made to be the good guy, you know, like the guy who's going to fix all of this and has a conscience about the fact that we have shit in our food. But, you know, we come to see that he's just as flawed as everybody else in this movie. You know, he's watching the pornography at the hotel. He's trying to fuck the girl who works at the fast food restaurant.
What's wrong with that?
Well, she's a teenager.
I don't think he was trying to fuck her. He was just making conversation.
I don't know.
Innocent.
I think it's
innocent.
implied. And what he finds out in the end is, what does he really gain from making a big stink out of this? He's only professionally putting himself at risk by trying to do what's right. And so he eventually just decides that he's not going to do anything and he's going to carry on with less passion than he was before. So that's the first plot of this movie. The second plot of this movie, which honestly takes up just as much screen time, especially in the back half, because Greg Kinnear's story is done by halfway through the movie, is following these 2 undocumented migrant workers who are sisters, and they've come from Mexico and they're set up with jobs at the slaughterhouse that makes the meat for Mickey's. And so they're sort of intertwined, these 2 stories. And it's this extremely tragic story of one sister who is sexually exploited by her foreman, played brilliantly by Bobby Cannavale. He's so good in this movie. He's so fucking evil. And the other sister, whose husband, Wilder Valderrama, is injured on the job, and she is forced to take an extra shift at the slaughterhouse on the killing floor. And they actually had to go down to Mexico to film this scene, because of course, you know, no slaughterhouse in America is going to allow a film set to film there. Yeah. And you get to watch these cows die and get cut up in the movie. And this woman, you know that she's only doing this because her husband hurt himself and now she has to make double the income. And not only is she doing this horrible work because her husband has been injured, but she had to sleep with the evil Bobby Cannavale character just to get this opportunity, quote unquote. And she's been subject to this sexual coercion, and she's just like crying as she cuts up the cows, and
she rips the kidneys out. She
Yeah.
gets given the task of reaching into the guts and removing the kidneys, because I believe they grind up the kidneys for something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's truly tragic. And this might have been the only point in the entire preparation for this episode where I did not want to eat burger, is like watching these cows die and then get caught up. And I was like, actually, I kind of want to throw up.
The movie also talks a lot about meth, which the book does briefly as well, but because they need to work so long, so hard, and so quickly, meth is very popular, or not popular, necessary in some of these places. And when Wilmer Valderrama injures himself, the company says that they found meth in his system. And we as the audience have never seen him do meth in the film.
No.
So it might be a convenient out, but they use that to blame the worker for his own industrial accident.
Right. Basically, the workers are given meth by the foreman, and then when they hurt themselves, they go, hey, he had meth in his system. He caused his own injury by doing drugs. We're committed to a drug-free workplace. And it's like, well, the meth came from the foreman who's sexually coercing all the employees into having sex with him, including Wilder Valderrama's wife. And it's like this heartbreaking scene where he has to sort of accept the fact that his wife is sleeping with the evil foreman because his back is hurt.
And that, I want to make clear, is no exaggeration. There's this organization here in Florida called the Fair Foods Council, and they work with tomato growers here. And what they do is they have auditors go and visit these migrant sites and interview them to see that the foremans, the managers in the company are living up to their very substandard agreements in order to sell these tomatoes to places like Publix and McDonald's and Taco Bell. But the amount of sexual abuse, it's not between the migrants so much. I mean, obviously that occurs, but the real sexual abuse comes from the managers, the white folk, who are exploiting these people to the nth degree. That part of the movie is the part that always stuck with me the most throughout my whole life. I think maybe it's part of my formative bleeding liberal heart bullshit about like there is no such thing as a bad migrant, in my opinion. Like just like a total and utter sympathy. So while the first half of this movie I found to be like kind of cheeky and fun, you know, it's like, yeah, we're eating shit. That second half is brutal.
Yeah, absolutely. And the film can be pretty didactic at parts, I found overly, but you know, it is based on a nonfiction book, so kind of comes with the territory. But I thought that there's that scene with the rancher. He explicitly, I think, speaks to the message of the movie when he says, this isn't about good people versus bad people. It's about the machine taking over this country. It's like something out of science fiction. The land, the cattle, human beings, this machine don't give a shit. Pennies a pound, that's all it cares about. A few more pennies a pound.
Bars.
Yeah. And so they've taken a lot of the political leanings of this book and then put them in the mouths of certain characters. And it sounds really great, I think, when it comes from this disaffected rancher. But I think a lot of the anti-agricultural industry stuff in this movie that's didactic comes from the teenagers in this movie. People like Avril Lavigne's character or the teenage girl working at the fast food restaurant. And when they talk about all the problems in our society being a result of these corporations, it's so funny that this is kind of what you sound like. You sound like these college kids, right? Who they go to the cattle ranch and let out all the cows. They cut the fence down only to find out that the cows don't run away. You can free an animal, but it's lived in captivity so long that it doesn't even know it wants to be free, which I think was like a pretty heavy-handed metaphor for human beings, you know, that like they can put all this information in front of us, showing us how every single stage of this food industry is evil and exploitative, but like at the end of the day, we don't want to be free from this evil to a certain extent. It's too part of our routine and comfortable life. But one of the things I love the most about this movie is the way that it incorporates all of these nonfiction details from the book, like from what the real world is like, into the story, right? So the movie opens with this group of businessmen, all white, discussing the big one. And then Greg Kinnear will go into the lab to discuss the new barbecue sauce, natural and artificial flavorings. And this is an example of them finding a way to incorporate this story about Flavortown in New Jersey into what the characters are doing in the movie to like elucidate this journalism as a fictionalized scene, which I loved. You know, the employees who work at the fast food restaurant will watch a workplace safety is your responsibility video, right? To get that message from the book into this fictionalized story.
Or the Paul Dano character who spends a whole bunch of the movie planning a robbery that never happens. It's a great gesture to the fact that he talked about disgruntled employees robbing the fast food joints, but doesn't necessarily lead to any dramatic payoff or moving of the plot forward. But these nice little touches. Or Greg Kinnear's wife being like, E. coli, isn't it that thing that kills children? Which it is. And he responds, no, I don't think so.
Or these little lines of dialogue that aren't of a lot of importance. Like there's this conversation between the teenage girl character and her mother, played by Patricia Arquette, where she needs her car to go to school, which requires this teenager to pay car insurance so that she can't help out her mother that month with the bills. And it's this little nod to the car-dependent infrastructure that plagues most of the country, where it's like, okay, now you can't help your mother with her bills because you need to pay for your car and car insurance as a teenager so that you can go to school, because there's no other way to get to the school.
If you were to lob a criticism at this movie, you could somewhat reasonably say it's a little bit preachy. But when I think of preachiness, I think of the king of preachiness, Aaron Sorkin, which is just to have characters tell you exactly what they think and list off a bunch of stats quickly and then tell you what to do. But I think what elevates this movie is that it is a slice of life drama. And you get to see how people really live under this system. And it doesn't give you a prescription for what to do. It's just a snapshot about how it is.
Right. And I think that there are a few prescriptions in the movie, though. Like, we see Ethan Hawke. I mean, it wouldn't be a Linklater film without Ethan Hawke's sort of free spirit character making an appearance. But he talks about how, with the South Africa protests and divestments, right? Like, that was all about a few passionate people spreading awareness about South African divestment until it became common enough that the university does divest from South Africa, and then Nelson Mandela is free. And I've heard Eric Schlosser talk in interviews about how there is a virtue to more people just knowing how bad the food production process is.
Oh, and the other prescription is don't have babies. Do not have children. From the Ethan Hawke character.
Right.
The whole thing just feels like such a pre-Obama artifact to me. And then when you rewatch something like this, and it reminds me of the person that I once was, I guess, where it was like more susceptible to this kind of outrage instead of discouraged by it, I guess.
Were you like Paco in this movie? The long-haired guy, the student protest?
No, and now it just feels kind of like caring is woke and gay. And so I wonder what a version of a movie like this, how that would exist today.
Right. I think it would be more preachy and annoying, to be honest.
And more ineffective.
There'd be a lot more characters announcing exactly what they think and what they are going to do, because it's coming out on Netflix and you're probably on your phone as it's on in the background.
I love the Mexican in this movie. You know, most of the movie is in like Mexican Spanish, and there's one line that I love. My favorite Mexican word is chingadera, and so Luis Guzman, who is the coyote in this movie, plays like a brilliant role, I think, in that he tells them, I have one rule, nada de chingadera, which means like, you know, no nonsense. And yeah, it's nice to see a movie from the 2000s that was at least 50% committed to telling a story of Mexican people in America where they're not speaking English, like they're speaking Mexican Spanish, and you're seeing the lives of ordinary people. It's not representation like Crazy Rich Asians or something. We're going to tell the story of the richest Mexican.
Yeah, and we should just, before we move on, shout out the stacked fucking cast of this film. You got Greg Kinnear. You got Patricia Arquette. You got Ethan Hawke crushing it. As we already mentioned, you have a cameo from Avril Lavigne, which is honestly pretty excruciating. She's not a great actress.
Probably because I think she is a vegetarian, maybe. And like, I can see a lot of people wanting to be involved in this project. Plus, you have the pull of Richard Linklater. So amazing cast.
Bobby Cannavale, Luis Guzman. It's great.
If you're going to read the book, you got to watch the movie because it's just so interesting to see how they take so many small details and incorporate it into the story.
This is apparently the same thing they did with Nomadland, which was a nonfiction book turned into a movie. And I have neither seen the movie nor watched the book, but I guess it's the same sort of idea.
Don't forget a very young and not so handsome Glenn Powell is featured in this movie.
That's right. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, also Chris Christopherson plays the based rancher.
Yeah, I like that rancher character.
Paul Dano.
We get a teenager party scene, too, which I kind of laughed at. Richard Linklater can't help himself. He's got to put in the teenage party scene.
Living out his glory days.
All right, let's talk very briefly about Food, Inc., which is the actual documentary version of the book Fast Food Nation in terms of it being a documentary about where our food comes from. And it is much more in line with the 2000s lib documentary culture.
It's been a while since I saw this, but a lot of the points in Fast Food Nation, I think they expand the scope a little bit to also cover the seed industry and Monsanto specifically. So they talk about how Monsanto has created these seeds that they've patented, and they will prosecute any farmer who tries to use these seeds. And for a lot of these farmers, the issue is that wind exists. And so to a certain extent, Monsanto seeds are going to end up all over the place, right, on your farms, even if you're not using their seeds. And if you harvest it and plant it, you will be prosecuted. But yeah, you get to see a cow that's had a instrument put it in so you can investigate its stomach while it's still alive, and you see what someone digesting corn versus grass looks like.
Basically everything that we said in our little book report on Fast Food Nation, you see in Food Inc. You see the chicken farmer contractor who says she feels like a slave. You see the chickens that can't get up. You see the corn that's being fed to fish. All of that is there. What is spelled out maybe more clearly is the conclusion. So they put hormones in the cow and it ends up in the milk. I forget exactly how it works, but the epic win that Fast Food Inc. proposes is that they got Walmart to label the hormone-free milk. And they got Walmart to carry both milks, and that you can choose which milk you want to buy once you have the information. Now, of course, the milk without the hormones is more expensive, but this is a true lib vote with your dollars. The only reform that we need is that people need the information, people need to do their homework, see the documentaries, watch the books, and then they will be able to make the informed consumer choice, and eventually the industries will have to respond to us. In order to maintain their products, if they see how we're consuming, they will respond to consumer demands, which I think, Isaac, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's so fucking quaint.
It's not like Americans freak out when the price of eggs go up and they'll buy whatever eggs are available to them, right? That's it's a very sustainable way to change the world.
Yeah, and it's also so fucking privileged. Like when you go to the grocery store and you see the different layers of cruelty applied to the eggs. You know, this is cage-free, this one's free range, this one's pasture-fed, and it, goes up from $4 to $10 or whatever it is. You as the consumer get to be like, how ethical can I afford to be? The hormone-free milk is more expensive than the non-hormone-free milk. The organic food is more expensive than the food made with pesticides and chemicals, right? Going to a farmer's market with your locally sourced shit is a once-in-a-while special treat for most people because that shit's expensive. So the idea that the solution is ethical consumption for some and poison for others, right? That is the logical conclusion of voting with your dollars.
Like almost all of these things in the 2000s, it puts the onus for responsibility on the consumer, which I think is just always wrong, right? Like, oh, you should drive a Prius to save the environment, right? Or like, you should buy the organic eggs to save the environment, which it's such a fucking cope or even like a psyop, honestly, that any of this responsibility should fall on the individual to fix climate change or the food industry.
I have to disagree with you a slight amount there because at the same time, I don't want to completely absolve the consumer and their behavior and their proclivities and their weaknesses for being exploited, for being rife for exploitation. I mean, yes, you shouldn't eat meat every single day, and a lot of Americans feel entitled to do so. Not only is it unhealthy for you, but it's unhealthy for the planet. I live every day with shame not still being a vegan. I think that it's one of those things that was right. There was no argument against it. I was annoying the way I did it, but at the same time, there is really no good argument against veganism. And we try to do that with, well, almonds take up this much water or something like that. But at the same time, just the math just is in its favor.
I'm pretty sure that most of the food that we grow, we use to feed meat animals.
Yes, the amount of space taken up to feed cows in particular, the vast alfalfa fields. Fucking alfalfa just to feed the cows and the diminishing returns you get every time something eats something that you have to eat subsequently. So I do feel like there is something to it. And in Food Inc., there's that family that says they wake up at 6 a.m, they don't get home till 9 p.m. at night. And so the easiest thing to do to feed the kids is give them a couple burgers. And I get that. I do feel like there is a certain degree of helplessness there. But at the same time, it's like you can also just eat a fucking can of beans. Go get a Goya can of black beans, put some fucking hot sauce on it, and if you need some carbs, eat it with chips. Like, there are options there, but they do exploit scientifically, like they just not with the taste science, right? But with behavioral science as well. They are manipulating you. But I don't want people to be so helpless in the face of these consumer giants. You can't completely destroy it, but you can make daily decisions that are better for you and better for the planet.
Yeah, and at the very least, we can not mock people who are eating organic foods. Like, while I was reading this book, I kept thinking about that Sebastian Maniscalco bit about people who shop at Whole Foods.
Is it organic? Is it farm to table? Do the chickens have friends, and do they play well with one another?
This reactionary spirit against organic foods is truly an indication that our brains have been poisoned.
Yeah.
Because it's like the people who want the animals to have a normal life, you know, not subject to insane factory farming and hormones and pesticides, the idea that we would mock these people is insane. And I'm sure some of it is class-based, right? That there's this imagined resentment at people who can spend more money on food. But I think it's just evidence of our brains being poisoned, that these people should be subject to mockery for wanting to not participate in this factory farming.
There is certainly a cultural divide between people who work with animals for a living, or it's just a part of their culture, and then the consumers of animals. With the cattle ranchers here in Florida, they're quite rough with the animals. I mean, they're not very like, oh, like cuddly with them. It's like, no, this is our job, this is our work. It was the same thing when I was in Tibet and we were hanging out with nomads and there were some other Americans there. The Tibetans just lived directly off of their yaks. And these Americans would go up and try and pet the yaks, and the Tibetans would be like, they don't like that. Don't do that. and so the liberal instinct to pet something and comfort it isn't always right. But yeah, you should want to prevent suffering. And we've seen just recently that the Trump administration is going to remove all regulations when it comes to animal welfare, especially with pig farms. They are starting to require certain kinds of animal rights when it comes to just like gassing them. I don't know if you've seen the pig gassing programs.
No.
Horrific videos of how we execute pigs before slaughter. It is not kind. And they're smart animals.
Yeah, the smartest animals we eat.
Can we talk shit about farmers markets for a second too? I really want to bitch about that.
Sure, this is the
please.
appropriate place, because that is the main prescription. Is this documentary gestures to farmers markets and saying like, hey, Fast Food Nation came out 8 years ago, and one of the big differences is that there are a lot more farmers markets now. And you know, we talked a little bit about this on our hipster episode, but the idea is that farmers markets was in the book Stuff White People Like. It is, I think, held up as being this substitute for participating in this factory farming program.
The problem I have with farmers markets is that it's not a place of utility. It is entertainment value.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
I get so fucking mad at the farmers markets here where all these fat tourists are just waddling and getting in my way, and I'm trying to get from point A to point B just to get my vegetables, just to get what I need to eat. And there they are, just looking around in my way, not there to actually buy anything necessary. Like, yeah, there's like a guacamole stand there. It's like, fuck off. You don't need a goddamn whole guacamole stand. That's not practical. Like, make your own fucking guacamole. So, yeah, I feel like the farmer's market could be a useful tool. And when you go to other countries and their food markets, they're amazing, right? Because they're every day.
Right. Yeah, that is true.
Why, yes, this once a week thing where you have to get all the food you need for that however period of time. But instead, it's a joke.
It's a bit of a LARP.
Yeah.
The original farmers markets were run, surprise, surprise, with trains when there used to be a lot of urban rail. If anyone's ever been to Philadelphia and gone to the Reading Terminal Market, which is all just shops and stands inside of a very old train building where there are no more trains. That's because back in the day, farmers would load up at the local train stop, take the trains to the city, unload there, sell, and then people would buy. But nowadays, there ain't no fucking trains. It's all cars. And like Isaac kind of hinted at with the guacamole stand, at my local farmer's market, it's not mostly fresh produce. It's mostly stuff that's been made, like tertiary products or whatever. There's like a cookie stand, and there's a fucking fermented veggie stand or whatever, or a bread place. It's pretty far from what it originally was, which was a purely utilitarian space. How do you get the farm to the city all in one space? Use the fucking train station.
Interesting. I didn't realize you guys were going to be so anti-farmers market. I was going to maybe suggest that people go to the farmers market.
I think they should, but I think that it's going to require some serious overhauls of farmers market culture. Even the farmers market itself, the way most of them operate is there's like a board, right? And they're the ones who allot these spaces for people for X amount of money. But what they do is, okay, this guy's making baguettes, so you can only make brioche. They do this weird thing where they don't want people stepping on each other's toes, and there's a lot of weird petty politics involved in it. And again, it's just the price range is out of control. And I don't know why, if it's just because they expect that kind of clientele to come there, or what?
I think it's because they're selling an experience. It's the same reason Starbucks is marked up. You are buying the farmer's market experience.
Yeah, the pickle prices are out of control at the farmer's market. I think I bought pickles there once. It was like $20 for like 3 pickles. And we can transition to our echoes in the culture section here a little bit, I think, because I do think that how often we see farmers markets in America is partially a result of books like Fast Food Nation, a rising awareness that the food you're buying at the grocery store is full of pesticides.
It's just unethical all the way down.
Unethical all the way down, exactly. And what we've seen recently in like the last year are rising grocery prices, which nobody can give me a straight answer on why grocery prices are going up. You turn on MSNBC and they give you like 7 reasons, including the war in Ukraine and COVID. And it's like COVID, quote unquote, ended like 3 years ago, right? Why wouldn't prices have been higher last year? I just don't buy it. I think it's bullshit. And I did look into the profit margins of fast food companies, and they have increased in the last 2 to 4 years. McDonald's profit margin is higher. Yum brand foods profit margin is higher, which means the company is just keeping a larger percentage of the revenue. However, I did look into the profit margins of companies like ConAgra Foods and found that their profit margins have actually gone down. So something is afoot, because the nature of technology and what capitalism and the free market is supposed to offer you is lower unit costs over time. Right? Technology gets better. We're able to make things for more cheaply. Think about like the way that TVs work now, right? To buy a TV represents a much smaller fraction of your income than it used to. And what we're seeing for groceries is that that is not happening for things like eggs and bell peppers, right? We're seeing that they actually cost more over time. Like we're becoming worse at making food than we were 3 years ago. And I think a big part of it is that we only have 4 companies that are making food. The late stage capitalism effects of a concentrated market power, like an oligopoly, have taken place.
And I don't understand how food prices can be going up so much when we have such a fucking surplus. Right? Something like 40% of all food that's produced goes to waste entirely.
Mm-hmm.
It is an artificial scarcity that is made by our economic model. You cannot support anything other than nationalizing food production.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of where we landed on with the prescriptions from the book and Food Inc. No one ever advocates for a nationalized food production program. I think their goal is that we vote with our dollars and that we tinker around the edges with regulation to make things safer. I came away from the book really thinking that we ought to nationalize food production.
The closest we got, and I don't want to be a lost cause Bernie bro here, but he was the only politician I've ever seen saying we need to break up big agribusiness, but it's never going to happen again. It is not the Bernie bros will rise again. That's not happening. And much like the real Confederacy, it's not rising again.
Hey, maybe you should put your hopes into Maha. You know, RFK Jr. might save us from poisoning ourselves.
That would be awesome.
A brain worm for every American.
What if that helps, though? What if it's like they used to give tapeworms to go on diets, brain worms to root out the bad thoughts?
I mean, it would be so great for RFK to do more for food than Obama. We're finally able to point to one of his drawbacks. Be like, you know, see, it wasn't that effective. RFK got rid of all the food trusts, at least. I just want to gesture a little bit to the effects that this work might have had on society. And I think that there were some very real world effects. Most people at least became aware, even if they didn't change their habits, they did become aware that there is nothing idyllic about the farm that their food came from, right? We did see, and we'll talk about this more in our McDonald's episode, but McDonald's worldwide revenue topped out in 2012. That is the most money they are ever likely to make. Now it's just a matter of trying to make their revenue more profitable. I've read a couple books on fast food that were written in like the late 90s or 2000, and if they've been published since then, like Golden Arches East, it has an afterword that was written in 2006, and it only talks about this, about the negative health effects. And so it's really interesting to see that when we're thinking about fast food being bad in the early 2000s, almost nobody was thinking about how it's unhealthy. Mm-hmm. That was something that came about as the decade went on, and we've seen a rise in fast casual places since the 2000s, which I think are hoping to cash in on offering something that seems like less unhealthy, less greasy. The proliferation of bowl places, right, since then, the Sweet Greens and Nayas of the world. We've seen this shift, I think, in consumer awareness of how unhealthy it would be to count on fast food as a major food source. Right. And we see it in their yearly revenue, and we see it in the way that we talk about fast food.
I think that's so spot on, and I think it's precisely because it's about your your self-actualization through food. The other things that these books and these movies point out is how it hurts us collectively, how it exploits labor, hurts the environment, hurts animal welfare. That didn't move enough people. Instead, what does it come down to? It's like, oh, how is this good for me? How can it make me as an individual better? There was a brief moment where veganism was all the rage, I think, the 2010s. And I remember a lot of athletes, professional athletes were going vegan. Damian Lillard, the football player Arian Foster. And they were going vegan because they're like, it's helping my body. It's good for me. It's not that it's good for the environment. It's not that it's just wrong to mass murder animals on an industrial scale. It's like, no, how is this good for me? And I think we're seeing that apotheosis of self-help health. That's what it's all about. It's about how you can thrive, not how you can help the people around you and make the world a better place.
Yeah, exactly. Great point. If there has been any shift in the way that we think about food production, it's mostly because the argument has been strongest at the individual level, right? Will I look good if I eat this food?
My optimization and what kind of concoction makes me live longer, not like not happier, but longer.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, some big changes, I think, in the way that we think about fast food in 2000 and today, largely as a result of this book.
For my closing thoughts, I want to say, Isaac, thank you for pushing back a little bit on us that, yeah, you see this posted on leftist pages all the time where someone will say there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. And people take that to mean like, okay, so I can have 5 burgers a day because no matter what, I can't get an ethical burger. So I might as well get 5 unethical burgers because nothing I get is ethical. And yeah, I appreciate that pushback of like, yes, we can't just wait around for them to nationalize the food industry and make it better. There are choices that you can make even with your very, very shitty late capitalist material conditions. There are some tinkerings that you can do to take less of a part in this society that we've set up. And I want to close out with, forgive me, I'm a parody of myself, but something from the world of the ancient Greeks. I'm going to tie it back to fast food, but the philosopher Plato had an idea called the tripartite division of the soul, or the 3-part mind. Soul, mind, interchangeable for Plato. It says, your soul is made up of 3 parts, and you can count them down from top to bottom. You have the top, which is the rational part of your mind, right? Logos, where your thinking happens. Then you have your heart. It's the seat of your emotions. Courage, fear, all of it, which can motivate you. And then you have your gut/genitals, right? This part is appetite. So logic, spirit, appetite is what you're made up of. And he has a metaphor when he describes this. Imagine a charioteer with 2 horses. You are the mind. You are up here. And you have these 2 other horses that you need to control. Your spirit and your appetite. And the insidious thing about fast food is that they are feeding those 2 fucking horses, right? They're feeding your appetite with their scientifically designed food, and they're feeding your spirit with their marketing. The one McDonald's ad that sticks in my head to this day came out during the 2010 Olympics in Canada, and it was not about how the food was good or tasty or good for you, or it would satisfy your cravings. It was an ad about a bunch of young 20-something college people going to McDonald's after the bar, and they're all eating chicken nuggets. It's like a bunch of millennial women wearing their going out tops or whatever, because the year is 2010. And I remember seeing that and be like, yeah, that's how I use McDonald's. That's the end of a sloppy night. That's what you use McDonald's for. And it targets that feelings part of you. And we all have the 2 horses in us. And we have lost control of the horses.
I want to add one other thing, which is you do not have to eat. You do not have to eat every fucking day of your life. That is ahistorical. So it's okay to be hungry, to feel hunger. Like sit with that feeling sometimes when you want to stuff your face hole with some shit because either you're bored or there's some other emotion going on in you. You literally do not have to eat every day. And the world would be a better place if you literally just one day a month, like, I'm not going to eat today. It's fine. I don't need to. Just try it. Just be hungry. It's okay.
It's crazy how distracting that hunger is when, yeah, you could go a whole day without eating and like nothing will happen.
No.
You could probably go like several days without eating.
People have dogs and use that as an excuse too. It's like, oh, I have to go home and feed my dog. It's like, your dog's going to be fine if it doesn't eat 3 square meals a day. Where the fuck did you come up with that idea? So it's like, yeah, literally, don't eat. Try it. Try and not eat sometimes. And you'll see, like, you're fine. It actually feels really good. You have a different kind of focus to you. So, like, I'm not trying to fat shame or, like, give people some weird eating disorders here. But the eating disorder is 3 square meals a day. That's fucking not real. You don't have to do that.
This is Paco talking here.
Jordano, closing thoughts?
Yeah, my closing thoughts are that, and I think this is a point that maybe was made in the book, I can't remember, but farms are traditionally thought of as the most idyllic place on earth. You look at the butter, and they have the beautiful farm, the fields, the blue skies. And when you go to your happy place in your mind, you're imagining probably being on a farm or like a ranch somewhere, right? The human ideal of this bucolic setting, right? And what's happened to farms is that they are a place where if you visited one of them, it would probably be the most traumatic experience of your life. Like, you would never emotionally recover from going to a slaughterhouse. And this is a place where, okay, maybe we have to accept that the animals will be treated cruelly because of the hierarchy of souls, as Isaac mentioned. But, like, can we at least treat the humans nicely? Like, is there any need for the humans to also be treated cruelly who work there? But this is the byproduct of a system in which there's two sides, right? The food producers and the consumers. The producers care a lot more. They are able to leverage, even though there are far less of them, they care about the outcome more than consumers. And so they are able to better fund and better organize their efforts towards their goals. And everybody else who's a consumer, you have no ability to leverage or pool your resources into being an advocate for consumers. And it results in the horrifying things that we eat every day.
Yeah, the fall of the farm is very funny because once upon a time, you had the idea of the yeoman farmer, right? It's wrapped up in the American identity that no matter what, you as a rugged fucking individual can go to some land that was stolen from the First Nations, you can set up your shop and you can sustain yourself and your family and you can sell the surplus to someplace else. And now there are basically no independent farmers. I mean, there are still some hanging around, but it's entirely concentrated into these massive corporate interests. That whole vision that was baked into the American fucking psyche is gone the way of the dodo.
Mm-hmm.
Real happy one for you today.
Yeah, real happy one. Final thoughts. Like I said, this will be part 1. We'll be covering McDonald's more closely in a part 2. Really interesting stuff. This series actually started off as a McDonald's series, but we decided to do Fast Food Nation first. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Isaac. We love having you on the pod. This is your 4th appearance, right? Every single one of your episodes is very popular, and I'd highly recommend people check out Isaac's podcast, Coexist Inc. He's been on a tear recently. You've been putting out multiple episodes a week, right?
Manic mode.
So there's sure to be a topic that interests you if you're listening to this.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to have you guys back on the pod, and we can take down Barack Obama once and for all.
Yeah, we're due an appearance on Isaac's podcast, and he's been gatekeeping his podcast from us. So if we're not on your show soon, we'll be forced to start a beef, I think. You know,
kayfabe. Yeah, no. If you guys like Remember Shuffle, you'll love Coexist Inc. I do that thing on Spotify where it's like, what shows are like yours? And I always put Remember Shuffle, even if my shit is like a little more unhinged and less research than you guys. But yeah, I have fun stuff coming up. I'm attending Brian Johnson's Don't Die Summit, and I'm actually going to do a video vlog where I will hopefully have footage of me harassing Brian Johnson and trying to feel his paper thin skin. And yeah, lots more to come.
Isaac will be looking at the instrument that they use to measure his nocturnal erections, much like the Flavor
erection
Town
calipers. Take your pants off now.
What is he eating? Do you know?
Pills, it looks like.
Pills, just
mostly pills.
Okay.
I watched the documentary on Netflix. It's fucking weird. It's just not a way to live life. I mean, again, don't eat. It's fine. You'll actually live longer if you don't eat, statistically.
Yeah, and you know, if you're at the grocery store and you see organic or non-organic, I know that I would naturally gravitate away from the organic food. I'm like, that means more expensive. Don't buy that. But I have found recently that I've been trying to erase the part of my natural reaction to seeing the word organic and being like, you know what? Actually, this means that it may have not been part of the horrifying factory farming system that I'm well aware of.
Or if you're at the Whole Foods, just go to the self-checkout and get organic and then just pay for the non-organic prices. It's pretty easy. Money is the issue.
That's our plug for the episode.
Steal.
All right, that's been our episode on Fast Food Nation and other food-related topics from the 2000s. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, please subscribe, and once again, huge thank you to Isaac for coming on the pod. Always appreciate your time, bud.
Yeah, check him out. Gluten Daddy.
Namaste.
All right, peace, everybody.
Peace. Ciao, ciao.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.